Hello, you're listening to the OMG MotoGP podcast with former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen and myself, Amy Reynolds. And I'm absolutely delighted to say today we are joined by someone who I can say was my former colleague, but he's been about in the paddock way before then. I started working with Matt Birt in 2015. He is the MotoGP World Feed commentator, but one of the probably now like longest standing journalists in the paddock, Matt. Like, how many years did you or were you the MotoGP editor for MCN?
Crikey, you're making me feel old here, Amy, already. We've only just got started. First of all, great to see you both. Nice to have a cyber reunion with the pair of you. 1996, Amy, all the way back, like nearly 30 years ago was my first year in the paddock with Motorcycle News. Was there until 2015, so the thick end of 20 years with MCN at the coalface, and then got an opportunity initially to do a bit of commentary alongside Keith at BT Sports, as it was then. And then, amazingly, after just one season, learning the ropes, learning so much off the absolute pros like Keith, Julian, Hodgie, and all that great crew at BT, I was offered the chance to go and work for Dorna. And as they say, the rest is history.
The cream finally rose to the top, I think. It was a bit slow in your case, but it got there.
Very slow. 19 years and a couple of months. Yeah.
But Matt, you started off at the real what do they call them, door knocker journalists?
Yeah,
tell us a little bit how you found your way into the paddock, because it's actually quite a cool story.
I always wanted to be a journalist, Amy, growing up, and it was kind of a dream that I just pursued regardless, no matter what sort of setbacks came along the way, no matter what bumps were in the road. It never kind of put me off. And I just managed to end up blagging my way into a local newspaper office in northwest Leicestershire, where I'm originally from. That's actually where I got the biking bug, really, because I used to cover a few races at Mallory and Donington Park. But used to do all kinds of things, from going to summer fetes, golden weddings, court reporting, where you get a fair amount of abuse, and going to things like the horrible side of it, where there'd be some fatality in some incident, and you'd have to go to the family and speak to them, recount memories of their loved ones. So it was a proper old school, hardcore sort of introduction, really, into the media, into journalism. So when I came to Paddock, and I had riders, slagging me off or saying, "Oh, you misquoted me," blah blah blah. It was just it was so easy compared to what I'd had pre-MotoGP, and it was actually a great schooling. Not the conventional way to get into the sport, but I got the bug, as I said, through the local newspaper. Its sort of geographical location being smack bang in the heart of the East Midlands, right in between Mallory and Donington. Covered a few early 90s Grand Prix, and I thought, this is pretty cool, actually. And then the opportunity came up to go to Motorcycle News in 1996. Applied thinking I didn't have a hope in hell of getting it. And here we are, nearly 30 years later, and still in MotoGP and still loving it.
Motorcycle News got lucky, didn't they, with you, really?
Well, I'll take the compliment, Keith. I've had a lot worse said about me down the years in the paddock. But what a wonderful opportunity it was that they gave me, and it's an opportunity that I'm still grasping with both hands now. I remember when I got the gig at the end of 95, started in the winter of 96. I was actually originally off-road reporter. They were struggling to find somebody to cover Grand Prix at the time. A really good friend of yours, Keith, of course, a good friend of all of us, Chris Herring, was had just left MCN at the time. I think he left World Superbikes, was going to go and work for Cashel Honda PR. But someone just stepped in to do the World Superbike gig, and they didn't feel like I was quite ready to do MotoGP, so they gave me 2 or 3 months on the off-road gig. Still couldn't find anybody. And we're like, well, Matt's done a pretty good job. So my first GP, believe it or not, was Jerez, 96, the Courier Duan Chaos. And my initial goal was, I thought, you know what, I'll do this for 2 years, see a bit of the world, then I'll go and do something else. And here we are, 28 years later, still hard at it.
It's one of those paddock, well, it's not just the paddock, it's just one of those jobs that as soon as you kind of get into it, it's really hard to come away from. Just the way of life, the fact that you turn up to work and you never know what's going to happen. I don't know if you guys are similar to me, but I quite enjoy the rhythm of the year. I like kind of it's a really odd little world to find yourself in, but it's a really odd one to find yourself out of.
Yeah, I mean, both of you. Yeah, both of you would know exactly what that's about. You get accustomed to knowing exactly where you're going to be at a particular point during the year, which does help from a planning side. When you're sort of trying to sort out your holidays and your life. It is a lifestyle, Amy. You're right. I mean, it's not for everybody. Living out the suitcase, being away from home, missing birthdays, missing parties, missing anniversaries. I mean, my credit card is still getting a proper battering because when my firstborn arrived in the world, she decided to turn it a month early, and I was sat in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and yeah, the credit card hasn't recovered from that one, to be honest.
Well, the thing is, the people that you end up traveling with, so like Matt, you and I maybe traveled together for, was it 7 or 8 years? I can't remember which one, but they do become your kind of like your family away from home. Like you basically knew me from 22, 23, watched me get engaged, watched me get married, had to put up with me being pregnant for a season, then had to put up with me being a new mum for a year as well. Like you literally, they are your family for the rest of the time, really.
Yeah, and I survived that period, Amy, which means I can survive anything, Yeah, I mean, of course it is. Yeah, I mean, your Paddock family, it's your second family. The Paddock's your second home. It's your extended family, and you do go on this journey with people because I joined the Paddock when I was 22. I've just turned 51. So you've seen this whole journey of people going through life's trials and tribulations, the life special moments, and you feel like you've been part of their own sort of individual journey as well. So yeah, I would not have changed a single second of it. And while somebody's still stupid enough to pay me to fly around the world and talk about motorcycle racing, I'll carry on.
You imagine being a brother to Julian Ryder then, like I am, being corrected every minute of your life, being wrong. So often.
But I mean,
I still.
But I think, like I was going to say, Keith, I mean, you two were the benchmark without any question, and I think a commentator like myself will never I can sort of aspire to sort of get to that level, but you've only got to still speak to fans in the UK, and they always remember the Huewen Ryder days so fondly. So all I can say, mate, is chapeau, because you guys were the A team, the sort of the gold standard for motorcycle racing commentary in the UK.
It's all down to Jules. Got nothing to do with me.
You can send the check in the post, Keith, for that one, yeah?
Yeah, thanks. It'll be a small one.
Yeah.
What used to be known as an MPD check.
Yeah, a rubber check, yeah.
As we've both got you guys here, like, just give us a bit of it's really hard to kind of imagine the Paddock how it used to be in the 90s. And Keith, you can talk a little bit even before that, but it's changed so much, hasn't it? Like,
you're very kind. I can talk it back to the 1970s. So, I do go back to when it was in black and white, and fences and gates were there to be challenged and climbed over or under, and everybody that shouldn't be in the paddock was in the paddock. Stuff was being stolen. Security guys were Hell's Angels at places like Spa. You're talking about a completely different sport to the one we're in now. Each era, though, just had its attraction. There was nothing at any of them that I can say that I wouldn't go back to. I love the progression. I love where we are. A lot of old stages, they talk about the good old days and all the rest of it. I've said it so many times on here and before. We're in the good old days now. We're having great days, some great developments, some great rules, some great racing. Perhaps not at the weekend. We'll get there in a minute. But Marc Marquez being the saviour of a race again. But it kind of was. You went from what was an amateur sport, not much more than club racing at Grand Prix level, into where we are now, which is I think we've reached the kind of zenith, if you like. I wouldn't want to see it get too much closer to Formula One in the way that it's regulated and awkward and difficult and and detached. I think Formula One has been, although having said that, Liberty are bringing it back to the masses a little bit more now as well. So the tie-up might be beneficial as it is, but I wouldn't want to see it go anywhere near like the Bernie Ecclestone Formula One formula, if you like. I think that Liberty might be a bit smarter than that, and we might have the proper access still for fans. I mean, it's funny enough, I was having a look, just a few minutes ago. Austria. We were whinging about 42,000 this year at Silverstone. Silverstone should be better promoted, and I'm a believer that Liberty will do that. We talked about it already, but they only had 67,000 at the Red Bull Ring on Sunday, which I think is not that. Yeah, it is. It's a good figure compared with Silverstone, of course, but I still think that even there they are struggling for the numbers that they once would have had in that region.
Yeah, I mean, just coming back to what you were saying about the pass for me. I mean, when I joined, I mean, you had to queue up to get the fax machine to fax the results back to the MTN office. I mean, can you imagine like the youth of today, the new media guys that are coming into the press room and saying that you've got to stand over there behind 20 other people and wait for your turn to get onto the fax machine. And I think back in those days when I joined as well, and Keith would know this more than anybody because he was a rider and he worked very, very closely with the media. But I think modern day MotoGP, there's now clearly a boundary between the riders and the journalists. I mean, my first Grand Prix in 1996, I was sort of chaperoned by the ex-MTN MotoGP reporter. And he just said to me, well, it's up to you. Get around the paddock, do a bit of networking, go and knock on Mick Doohan's motorhome door. This is my first Grand Prix. I was fish out of water, 22 years of age. And they go and bang on Mick Doohan's motorhome door. And Mick, at that time, had a reputation of being pretty fearsome, pretty tough going with the media. He didn't suffer fools lightly at all. And there's me going, yeah, no problem. I'll go knock on his motorhome door. Knock, knock, knock. And, those days don't happen anymore. It just does not happen. The riders are controlled a lot more. And I think, to be honest, that's to the detriment of the sport in some ways because, they've lost that link. But now you are told when you can speak to media. The riders come, as you know, Amy, the riders come to a media debrief at the end of the day, and that's it. If the rider wants to talk to you when you bump into them in the paddock, fair enough. But access now is much more regulated. And I think that's probably, for me, one of the big differences from when I first joined in the 90s.
I have some sympathy with the riders, though. Sorry, Amy.
No, you go for it.
I have some sympathy with the riders in that situation, only because technically and every other way of life now for a rider is completely different to how it was. In 100%. My day, you got off the bike, you had a beer, fag, cigarette, and cruised under the sun. It was great. Yeah, it's all right. Couple of clicks on the back, couple of clicks on the front. That'll do. Pump the tyres up. And it's evolved into a very technical sport, both for the rider in his physique, diet, mental situation. And then there's the technical stuff to do with the bike. They just do not have the time anymore. So you end up with PR. I call them anti-PR because quite often they, push against anybody burst in their bubble for a little bit of a chat with a rider or a technician because everybody's so bloody tied up.
Yeah, that's
I have sympathy for them, but is it to the detriment? Probably it is. And I think the media get a bit of a raw deal, especially the written press. I think the TV get pretty much good access at the end of the day. But I think the written media, and of course the new media of digital stuff, I think that they struggle a bit more to get the kind of stuff that they deserve to get, that we deserve to read.
You're absolutely right, Keith. I mean, the demands now on the riders' times at a race weekend are huge. Sometimes you're walking out the paddock at 9, 10 o'clock at night and they're coming out the back of the garage because they've had 2 or 3 hours poring over the computer, looking at the data, trying to find that thousandth of a second. There's much more pull on their time. There's much more sponsors, big name, high profile sponsors that are wanting them to come and do meet and greets with clients. And the sport, modern day sport in general, not just MotoGP, fan engagement is just so important and so huge now. They're coming to public appearance on the stage, the Hero Walk, which are fantastic initiatives because you need the public to be engaged with their hero. That's what's going to keep the interest in the sport. It's what's going to keep driving the numbers through the gates. So yeah, I do take your point, Keith, on that one. Yeah, the time now that's demanded of the riders is as high as it's ever been, and it's probably only going to get worse, actually.
I did that Hero Walk in Silverstone. I actually hosted it. It was so good. I've obviously heard of it. It was like kind of being put into place just as I left. That was the first time I'd seen it in action. And it was really cool because it was a really great opportunity for the fans to get up close and personal with the riders. And also it's on a Sunday. So like the hype is there. It's like right before the race. And I thought it like fed in quite nicely. They finished that parade lap and then they came in and did the rounds. Like it wasn't really what I was expecting. For some reason, I had the hero walk in my head, which is stupid because it doesn't actually make sense. As like a media thing. I'm going to prelude today's chat as well, guys. I'm going to throw it in there and make an excuse for myself. I have not slept for 3 days. Anybody with a baby can completely empathize. So if I sound or go off on a tangent, I'm just going to apologize right now because I can even hear my voice like shaking. So I really apologize. Anyway, let's move on and talk about the weekend's race at the Red Bull Ring, which I'm going to put myself out there for an absolute slating. So that was the most boring MotoGP race I've ever watched.
Well, if it hadn't been for Marc Marquez, we wouldn't have had much of a race, would we? Both on Saturday and Sunday. At the end of the day, it's the Marc Marquez show for Sunday, particularly making a comeback, made it work. I mean, I looked at the numbers. Birdie, we're always the same, aren't we? We're bloody pouring through numbers and sheets and stuff. He was impeccable, Pecco, wasn't he? He was relentless. The times that he was doing, even when Jorge Martin was keeping him honest right towards the end. He just upped the game just a little bit, just a few thousands here and there, and Bagnai just made it boring, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, my timing's not great, is it, making my debut on this podcast? Because if Sunday's race was a movie, it'd be straight to DVD, wouldn't it? It was not a classic by any stretch of the imagination, but that's not belittling, as Keith just mentioned, the absolute brilliance of Bagnai at the moment. I mean, his level. He's raising the bar, it seems, not just race by race. It's almost like session by session, lap by lap. His skills, and that Ducati GP24, it just looks like the ultimate match made in heaven. It's just a phenomenal combination. And right now, 5 points between Pecco and Jorge in the championship is absolutely nothing. I mean, incredibly close after 22 races this year. But the way it's going at the moment, you can only see it going one way in terms of the championship. Pecco's going to do the three-peats. Sunday's win was his 25th. There's now only 9 riders in the history of the championship in the Premier class that have won more than him. And that, as you can imagine, is a who's who list of absolutely great and good in World Championship racing. So he's going to be a very, very tough guy to move from the top of that championship now. And the Red Bull Ring just plays to his strength. He's an awesome breaker. You listen to all the other Ducati rides, they say that's where he makes up all of his time. That's where they see that he's so good. And that Ducati around there is just phenomenal. So I think pre-weekend, we were always kind of thinking it could be the Pecco show. And he didn't disappoint, did he?
Do you think Pecco's a little bit underrated as like a rider? Because we don't ever really talk about him as being a Marquez, or like we don't ever really talk about Pecco as being one of those, to use an old word, an alien, do we? But putting it that way,
I think he's a bit of a professional. The way he goes about his business is so incredibly straight line. It's not got the drama of Marc Marquez or some of the riders previously, and I think that's the bit that there's no peaks and troughs that you see with Pecco. It is literally bang, bang, bang. He hits all his. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a more perfect performance from somebody than the likes of the weekend. He knew what he had to do at the end of lap 1, pushed his way past Jorge Martin, and then just hit his markers. And it's so hard to do on 200-mile-an-hour motorbikes that have got the amount of gadgets and gizmos on them nowadays that you've got to control and got to time to perfection to get that right every single lap for 28 laps. It was a masterclass, and everybody will look at that. I mean, for me, I'm looking forward to 2025 when he's got the guy that is relentless, that won't give up, that will ride around anything. I mean, I don't think Marc Marquez is as perfect a rider as Pecco Bagnai. It's a big statement to say, but I don't believe he is as perfect. He will ride around, bits and pieces, and his raw talent will be the thing that puts him in the. But I think Jorge Lorenzo said something at the weekend to DAZN, who he's been working for as a broadcaster, that the situation with Marc Marquez is the fact that he doesn't lose heart in any circumstances. I mean, he mucked up at the start. He didn't get the bloody ride height adjustment where he wanted. He was too busy concentrating on his front tyre because they had a problem with a valve or whatever it is. I've never seen Frankie Carcetti look as serious as he looks. His crew chief at the time. He absolutely looked like his backside had fallen out just prior to the race. And they had to change a wheel because the valve was a problem. Mark had to concentrate on getting some heat in the because he wanted to use the original tyre. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, but I think he wanted to use the original tyre that they'd used on a new rim, and he had to concentrate getting that up to speed by the time he got round to the start line on the warm-up lap. And then, of course, he mucked up by braking just a little bit again, and he lost the front ride height adjustment. It pinged back up, and that's why he had to come in together with Morbidelli.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Keith. And you're absolutely bang on the money as well. Just coming back to Frankie Carcelli, I mean, Frankie certainly has got a lot more grey hair on his head than what he had in Qatar at the first Grand Prix of the season. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter what they do. They just can't catch a clean weekend where everything goes to plan Friday, Saturday and Sunday. There's always some curveball that comes away of Mark, whether it be his own mistake, like the big crash we saw in the Sachsenring, or there's just something that comes along that just blows them slightly off kilter. And if that happens in MotoGP these days, if you're 99%, it's not good enough, particularly when you're trying to race and beat Pecco Bagnai. But I think, unfortunately, for the spectacle on Sunday, we were denied. I'm not saying it was going to be a 2017, 2018, 2019 absolute belt that we saw Mark with Lorenzo and Dovizioso, but I think it would have been a very, very different race, because you've only got to look at the second half of that Grand Prix. Mark's pace was way better than Jorge and Pecco's, and he was coming through the field. I mean, people say it's hard to overtake in MotoGP these days. You look at Le Mans, look at Barcelona, look at the Sachsenring. The Sachsenring, one of the hardest tracks to overtake on the whole year. Nadgery, tight, twisty. Mark's come from the fifth row in all three of those Grand Prix to the podium, which just shows what an unbelievable motorcycle racer he is. And as Keith said, he's able to deal with setbacks and things that come his way. I mean, he would have clearly been flustered by that instant pre-race here on Sunday. 14th in Sector 1, and he comes back to finish 4th. And all weekend, every single rider in the Red Bull Ring was saying, because of all the hard braking, the stop and go nature of it, they were having an absolute nightmare. Front tyre temperature, front tyre pressure. That front Michelin tyre was cooking from lap 1 in Spielberg. When you're in the middle of the pack like Mark was, it's going to be absolutely off the scale, the pressure and temperature. But he still finds a way to get through the pack. So many other guys are just sitting there, can't make a safe overtake, can't make moves. Marc Marquez came through from 14th to 4th place. He's just astonishing to watch. Love him or loathe him, his box offer, he always brings the show. And I think we all know next year when he's on that 2025 bike, stand back and watch the fireworks, folks.
Do you think that's what it was, though? Because, like, it wasn't boring just because Pecco won in like such a kind of owning way. The race just didn't really like build momentum and get going. Yeah, there were a few battles happening behind, but like we said, it wasn't a box office race. Do you think it all did come down to the front tyre?
Well, that was the problem, wasn't it? I mean, it is the problem, because that's where, I mean, how many of us all sat waiting with bated breath to see who was going to get a penalty at the end of the race? Because I'm amazed that we didn't see any of that. And you're talking about the battles that were going on. The battles all seem to be amongst teammates. You know, you had the KTMs against each other, the Aprilias against each other. Obviously, you know, Mark and his brother were coming together as well on the Grassini bikes. It was kind of a strange, surreal kind of a race. It wasn't one that I'd ever seen like that before. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jorge Martin did everything he could do in that Grand Prix to make a show of it. Jorge knew that he had to get in front of Pecco very, very quickly. Of course, in the sprint, he got a little bit too keen, a little bit too greedy going into the chicane, ran in way too hot, went through the shortcut, and then didn't lose the second he needed to in that sector or the next sector. So, I mean, some people say, well, that was a bit of a harsh penalty, but them's the rules. You've got to play by the rules. And I think the problem at the moment, Jorge acknowledged this after the race when I spoke to him on the broadcaster set. You look at the lap times between Pecco and Jorge, they're so close. There is really nothing in terms of speed and pace between the two of them. I think Pecco's very, very slight edge right now, and we saw it in both the sprint and the Grand Prix here in Spielberg on Sunday, is he just seems to have that little bit more confidence, that little bit more trust in that front tyre when he's got the full fuel tank, particularly in the Grand Prix on a Sunday. And Jorge alluded to this. You know, he said, like, you know, he led both the end of the first lap in the sprint and the Grand Prix, but Pecco just has got that little bit more aggression and that little bit more trust. If Jorge can sort that out, then I think he's going to be firmly in the game. The problem is, of course, we don't want the races being decided by who's going to be leading by the end of lap 1 or lap 2.
I think that the penalty that he picked up on the sprint race on the Saturday that you're talking about, the Jorge Martin basically got blown out of the water with that penalty. He didn't lose a second that he needed to have lost.
Yeah.
We ought to probably clarify that to some extent. They know what they've got to lose, and they have an opportunity to back out of it if they haven't lost enough in that situation. But I hate it. I absolutely hate that rule. In that, you've got to think about it. It ruins your entire momentum trying to concentrate on everything. They've got so much going on them bloody motorbikes that are going so quick everywhere. Aero worrying about ride height adjustments, worrying about front tire pressures, worrying about, and you've made a bit of a mess of it at the chicane. You've clearly not gained an advantage, but you've just missed out by a few hundredths or whatever it was in the 1 second that you had to have given back to the man that you made the pass on, even though you've already penalised yourself. So I think Jorge Martin was calling for a change, regarding that rule, and I'm with him on that one, because I think, we want to see racing. He gained no advantage. The other side to that coin is, of course, if it was gravel or if it was grass, he would have had a bigger disadvantage. So I think that there is the other argument to that. Well, he wouldn't have risked it if it had been gravel or grass that he'd got to ride through. So the other side of the coin is that. But I still think that we miss out on racing when somebody gets a 3.5 second long lap penalty. And we were robbed in the sprint of those two going for it when they had no tyre issues, didn't have to worry about tyres or longevity of tyres. They could just go flat out for the half distance race. So we were a bit robbed on Saturday because of that. And I think I fall on the side of Jorge Martin. I think that rule needs a bit of a rethink. Come on, Simon Crayford.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll lobby Simon to get that one sorted out for next year in his new role as the chief of the stewards. I think you're right, Keith, in some respects. Yeah, I mean, does the punishment really fit the crime on that one? And I loved listening to Bagnai speaking after that sprint, because, as you mentioned, Keith, these guys these days, they're dealing with so many things, so many buttons they've got to press, everything they're trying to control, and it's all happening at 150, 200 miles an hour. Somebody asked Bagnai after the sprint, was he aware that Martin was had not taken the second pound? He goes, yeah, I know exactly what was going to happen, because I came over the line at the end of that second lap. Obviously, he'd seen Jorge barrel roll up on his inside and take the shortcut. So immediately Pecco's gone, well, he's got to lose a second. Comes over the start-finish straight, sees on his pit board, Martin plus 0.3, and goes, he didn't lose a second. He's going to get busted. I mean, it's just amazing, the clarity of thought that's going through their mind. And for Pecco Bagnai, he's got Marc Marquez and Jorge Martin on his chuff. But the first thing he's thinking about doing 200 mile an hour down the start-finish straight is, I'll just check my pit board to see if Martin did lose the lap, did lose the second. I mean, unreal.
Do you there's obviously going to start, and I think it really already has started, perhaps at the race we've just seen, whether there's going to be, or speculation, whether there's going to be any disparity between those two GP24s. And, theoretically, they should be identical bikes, same engine, same everything. The only way that they can be different is via setup. Do you think there is any kind of disparity there between the two at all? Or do you think really it does come down to that pure thing of Pecco just being a little bit better on a full fuel tank on new tyres?
There's always been a disparity, and there's always going to be a disparity between the full factory team and an independent team setup. I mean, to start with, from a technician point of view, you've not got as many of them working towards getting to where you're getting to. And at the minute, I think we've already touched on it, that Pecco is at the top of his game when it comes to getting that absolutely perfect. Jorge Martin is a slightly imperfect genius at the minute. He's the guy that makes the little mistakes here. Go back a couple of years, and Pecco Bagnai made mistakes. He would fall down a bit too. We could argue in the sprint races, he's still doing it. But the point is, he would make mistakes back in the day. But he's just become a much more complete weapon, I think. Jorge Martin, I'm just so looking forward to what he can do with Aprilia. I'm going to say, I hope Aprilia don't let him down. I don't mean that as any disrespect to Aprilia, but I just hope that they can keep the momentum they got going through the winter, so we get into next year. Bearing in mind, everyone's going to have their eyes on the year after that, when they've really got to get developing for the new rules in 27. So it's a difficult time for a small factory like Aprilia. But I hope it's Bagnai. I hope Martin can keep that momentum going when he gets to Aprilia. It's just going to be so bloody exciting.
Yeah, it will be. And I think the problem is, we need Aprilia, KTM at the moment to step up big time, because listen to Brad Binder. Well, I spoke to some of Brad's crew actually in the Vienna airport hotel on Sunday night, and they said that Brad was actually super happy with his race on Sunday in Spielberg. 5th place, nothing to write home about, because KTM, as we well know, they are not here to lose. They are here to win. And we can see Pit Bar and Stefan Piera, a couple of guys that aren't famed for their patience. They will not be liking this drubbing they're getting at the moment from Ducati. But Binder, he's told the media, and his crew confirmed this on Sunday night, he did not make a single mistake in that Grand Prix. He rode that RC16 to its absolute limit. He was 19 seconds behind Bagnai at the checkered flag. Now that is a humongous gap, a massive chunk of time for a guy who did not make a single mistake in the whole Grand Prix, pushed the package to its absolute maximum. It just shows the level that Ducati and Bagnai have taken it at the moment, and everybody else has got to raise their game. They've got to try and lift that bar, because right now you wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if Ducati did not win every single Grand Prix for the remainder of the season. It would not be a shock at all.
That feeling Brad Binder is mentioning, the feeling of getting it absolutely to the limit, bang on dead right, is such a rare feeling. Like you always get to the end of a race and think, could have just done this a little better, could have just been a bit better there, and then you look through your data and all the rest of it. But and it's been a thing for a rider forever, as long as I can remember. The feeling of knowing you left nothing on the track, it was all done. Brad Binder, I can see why he'd been happy, because he could do, no one could have done more with that motorbike. He left that 1,000% in KTM's court. KTM have got to improve, because he as a rider did everything you could do on that motorbike at that time. So, as you've said earlier, chapeau. For him to feel in that manner. I feel a bit sorry for Jack Miller. He was in amongst the mix at some stage as well. Jack, he just needs a couple of comeback rides, really, doesn't he, to get him back on where he needs to be. And I thought this might be one for him, and it didn't turn out to be that way again, which is a bit of a shame. Acosta, he's just having that kind of mid-season dip at the minute, the reality of where he is as a rookie on an independent gas in comparison, which is a KTM, but obviously once removed. So Acosta's getting a bit of a reality check in MotoGP at the minute. He's had the lovely honeymoon period at the beginning of the year where he sort of kicked a few arses here and there and made a big name for himself. But now, oh hello, they've all kind of cottoned on and caught up, and everyone's on their game now.
Yeah, and there's nothing quite like a reality check than a 190 mile an hour front end washout down the hill into turn 4 in Austria, which he had on Friday, which was...
And it was his second one.
Yeah, his second one in 2 laps as well. It's like, it was almost like you say, Keith, he had that honeymoon period. There's that sort of, that surge when you first burst onto scene. And I think now it's a test of his mettle and a test of his character. I think he's going to have no problem in dealing with it. I think that the kid's mentally bulletproof. I don't think there's any sort of chink in the armory for him not to come back. But it's that inevitable little blip, that bump in the road that they all seem to come across at some point. And I think KTM and the sort of PR Mobility Group bikes at the moment still don't seem to have quite got their heads around this new Michelin generation rear tyre for this year. And I know that Ducati are in a position of strength because they've got 8 bikes, 8 different riding styles. It's a wealth of data and information that you can pore over to get your head around it. But you remember, cast your minds back to the first couple of Grand Prix, Qatar and Portimao, Martin and Bagnai. All we could hear coming out their mouths, chatter, 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 chatter. But when was the last time you heard a Ducati rider mention chatter? Very, very rarely, whereas the KTMs and the gas boys still seem to be struggling. You hear the Aprilia guys as well. Massimo Rivola, their boss at the weekend, was saying that they are still trying to get their head around this tyre. We see in the sort of shorter length sprint races, Aleix and Maverick tend to be able to take the fight to the Ducatis, But over the full double distance feature race on Sunday, they're not there, or they're not there as often as what we expect them to be. So it seems that Aprilia can get the tyre working over the sort of 12, 13 laps of the sprint, but over the longer distance, they're overstressing it too much. They haven't got the grip at the end of the race like the Ducati has, and it's a big old conundrum for those Aprilia, KTM and Japanese engineers to work out, because Ducati got it absolutely nailed.
I mean, like Aleix, obviously on Saturday in the sprint, but you do seem to see that a lot with KTM in terms of their development. They yo-yo. They just about catch up and you go, oh, here we go, KTM are coming, and they start firing in some really, really decent results. And then they inexplicably kind of drop off the cliff of the edge. But when you throw something like that in, like getting your head around a brand new rear tyre, when you've got 8 bikes versus 2/4, it makes a lot of sense, really, doesn't it? You've got that much more manpower to feed in all the information.
I mean, at the moment, that Ducati GP24, it does lots of things very, very well, and it does some things exceptionally well. When you watch it, it doesn't look like it's got any weak point whatsoever. And Pecco Bagnai at the moment certainly doesn't have any weak points in his riding. I mean, you listen to the Aprilia guys, the KTM guys that are racing the Ducati up close and personal. They just say it stops on a sixpence, it just flicks into a corner. The old understeer issue, ciao, that's long gone, and they just cannot do anything about the Ducati punching off the corners. The electronic and mechanical grip that they have. This year's GP24, the rear eye-out device squats 20 mil lower than the GP23, which doesn't sound like much, 20 mil, but it can make a huge difference in your drive and acceleration coming off the corners. You know, you're not having to fight as much wheelie, you're not having to moderate with the throttle or the rear brake. I mean, as good as Pecco Bagnai is as a rider, you have to also doff your cap to those Borgo Panigale tech boffins, don't you? Because it's probably one of the most sophisticated, well-rounded piece of motorcycle engineering we've ever seen in history. It's just phenomenal.
Why do riders because I think I was listening to, I think I've got this off another podcast, like Casey Stoner, they just don't like the developments of the bikes of these days. Like, what is it?
I think it was more to do with the fact that Casey Stoner liked to be in control of every single element of that. I mean, electronics and the like back in the day, they're a bit clumsy back in the day as well. I think our sophistication has moved forward a considerable amount since then.
But even Marc doesn't like them, right?
Well, I mean,
Marc doesn't like all the.
It takes away some of the raw, talent, if you like, that a rider like Marc has, that Casey had. That they were. You mentioned earlier on, right at the beginning, about aliens. Pecco Bagnai at the moment is riding that bike like an alien because he is getting the very, very best from it. He has found the absolute perfect way to ride that motorbike and to consistently get the best from it. Back in the day, when they were a bit livelier, shall we say, when they were a bit more out of control, when they were a bit less predictable, when they were, that was the era of the Stoners, of the Marc Marquezes, who could ride around any kind of, improvise with what they'd got underneath them. And I think that we should, I do, have respect for someone like Pecco, who is, okay, so it's not like a Marc Marquez, out of control, sideways, front tucked, all the rest of it. But it is a perfect ride. We can't feel what he is doing to make that motorbike work in the way it's doing. And I'll tell you what, there's bloody 21 other riders that wish they could, because the way he's making it work is very, very special indeed. Okay, it's not quite as spectacular. Maybe that'll come back with the changes of rules when we get to 27, when bikes get a little bit less aero, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You'll have to ride them a bit different to how they're able to do it at the moment. But I don't think we can take anything away from Pecco, and I don't think we can say he's not an alien. But I understand where we were headed with that. With Stoner and Marquez, I've got to be two guys that didn't particularly like the electronic interference, particularly when we went away from when we went to the spec ECU and inertial platforms, which basically took us back years compared with where Honda were with their electronics. Honda had a motorbike that was, think of it like a stealth fighter that couldn't fly just by the pilot's brain power. It needed all the extra computations to keep the bloody thing in the air. And that was exactly how the original Hondas were. If you didn't have that electronics package that was keeping the thing on the track, you were going to go to the moon at some stage, involuntary, of course. And when we went to the Magneti Marelli spec package across the board, across the paddock, there are all sorts of people that struggled with the new package because they couldn't get the software written in there that would make it work in the way that they wanted to. And I think Honda suffered, and probably still do suffer, hugely from losing that electronics advantage that they had back in the day.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think you only got to look at there are 3 other riders on GP24s this year, and Jorge Martin is the only one that can consistently take the fight to Pecco. Enea Bastianini, we know that he's a fantastically gifted rider, but Enea's a bit of a yo-yo. British Grand Prix case in point. I know where he rocks up and does the double for the first time, looks unbeatable, and you're sort of thinking, Enea, if he can keep this form going, he's going to be a proper serious threat for the championship. And then he comes to the Red Bull Ring, which we know is a very Ducati-specific circuit. It plays to the Ducati strengths, and he's not close. He's not anywhere near both Jorge or Pecco. I must admit, early on in that Grand Prix, when he got that brilliant start, 7th to 3rd, I was thinking in my head, I didn't say it on commentary, but I was thinking, Enea's 3rd, right on the rear tyre of both Jorge and Pecco after the first couple of laps. Well, this could spell trouble for Pecco and Jorge, because we know how good Enea is at the end of races. But like so many riders at the weekend, he just did not have that confidence with the front. Lots of riders complaining about front locking, having to run that harder suspension with the hard braking zone. The front just wasn't there for Enea all weekend, so he just wasn't able to sort of push on as hard as he wanted to. But you can only compare Pecco against the other guys on that bike, and he's creaming them at the moment.
Sadly, we are kind of chasing our tails a little bit with time, so I really want to kind of touch on our Moto2 and Moto3 races before we kind of round things up. Let's talk about Moto3 first. David Alonso, was that his 7th win, Matt, of the season?
7th win and counting, Amy. Yeah, I mean,
oh my god,
that kid is, you get the impression that he's the next big thing, don't you? I mean, we're sort of still waxing lyrical, quite rightly, about Pedro Acosta, but it looks like we've got another superstar in the making coming with Alonso. I mean, the kid's got everything. How good he is on those last 4 or 5 laps. He just blends brilliant raw speed with some proper racecraft. He's only a teenager, but tactically, strategically, the way he picks his moments to push, the way he manages races, long lap penalty on Sunday, no problem, didn't get flustered. That kid, his career is going stratospheric. One to watch because he's just awesome. He's brilliant.
His motorcycle career is going stratospheric. His dancing career just needs to stop.
maybe not a candidate for the Colombian Strictly Come Dancing, is he? No.
He was awesome.
Yeah, he is brilliant. Yeah, I think he's absolutely phenomenal. Moto2, obviously he's going to get promoted up to Moto2 next year. I mean, the way he's going, he could have that Moto3 championship wrapped up with 2 or 3 races remaining.
What a lovely! That's a great position to be in as well, isn't it? When you've got it done, so you can just do things for the fun of it towards the end of the season. You've not got the pressure. He'll carry on winning throughout the year, I'm sure. But it's nice with that already signed up deal for next year as well. He's going to be. There'll be a few people in Moto2 that are going to be looking to the sides at the moment.
There will be, yeah, absolutely.
And Celestino Vietti in Moto2. So that was the 8th different winner this season.
Yeah, well, Celestino Vietti just needs to lobby the championship to have like 20 races at the Red Bull Ring and 20 races where Valentino rocks up as well, because that's now 2 years in a row where Vietti's won it in Austria and Vietti's done it with the boss standing at the side of the track as well. So maybe he needs to sort of lean on Valentino a little bit, maybe retire on the old 4 wheels and just turn up to a few more Moto2 races. But great job by Vietti, awesome job.
And maybe you guys can shine some light on this for me. I got super confused yesterday when I saw the Aspar Instagram message, and it obviously then kind of put everything together. Jake Dixon next year will remain in Moto2, but he is moving to the Marc BDS team. Put some context on that move for me, because when I saw it, I just didn't quite understand the move away from a team where he's super familiar with the setup. They're really familiar with Jake. It looks as though they are hitting their markers again. I just don't really understand the thought behind it. Maybe you guys have got a bit more information on how that's kind of come together.
Well, maybe it's got something to do with the future of where that trajectory is going to take Jake if he continues to perform at the top level in Moto2. I think that, for me, would be the political underlying line, if you like, that you must follow in that situation, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Jake's only done a 1-year deal for 2025. He's not locked himself in for 2. There won't be many MotoGP contracts up for grabs in 26 because so many of the current grid have locked in 2-year deals. But there are a few, well, there's 2 or 3 pretty prized seats that could be up for grabs in 2026. So I think he's played a pretty smart game as Jake. And I think, well, Keith would know more than me, Amy, as an ex-rider, but just observing from the outside, you're absolutely right. I mean, Jake's came into World Championship racing with Aspar. He loves it, family atmosphere. But I think there comes a point in any rider's career, doesn't matter how happy you are with a particular situation, sometimes you just need that new challenge, that new environment, that new motivation. And I think that's what Jake's looking for as well. This year has been brutally tough at the start. Took him a while to get his head around the switch to WP suspension and Pirelli. I mean, I think that was tough. I mean, to go from changing tyres would have been huge to have got your head around, but changing tyres and suspension in the same season, I don't really understand the logic behind that one, to be perfectly honest. And we're only now seeing halfway through the season, the likes of Jake and Vietti really start to show the talent that we've always known that's there. But I don't think Jake's out of the championship. I mean, I know he's over 60 points behind, but I didn't realise, so I was glancing down at my notes on Sunday after taking that podium, he didn't score a point until round 6. And I think in the last 6 Grand Prix, or 5 or 6 Grand Prix, nobody scored more points than Jake. So if you can carry on this form, and if the others at the front keep tripping themselves up, like Garcia, long lap penalty on Sunday when he had a safe top 6, Agura injured, Joe Roberts is a bit up and down, a bit inconsistent. I think Joe's head's been scrambled by the fact that he didn't get the Trackhouse racing ride, which is, you can understand. So at the moment, there's not really anybody that's stamping their authority on that Moto2 World Championship. So I think Jake's still got a great crack at it.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up really, really well there, particularly in the if we can drop back onto the suspension and tyre thing. I mean, you can have all the data with the suspension that you've got with the previous tyre manufacturer, but then when you've got both sets of data that are forever fluctuating between the two, an absolute nightmare area to be in, that is for sure. And they've done a great job to get him to where he is. And Jake's done a great job holding his head. You know, the problem is if his brain had gone, if he'd be out of racing. You know, he'd be out of top line racing, but he's held it together. He's made it work. And another podium at the weekend, absolutely outstanding for him.
We filmed our podcast for the preview to this weekend before the announcement about Agura joining Trackhouse next year in MotoGP. So I didn't have my opportunity to put this one to you, Keith, but I can put it to both of you now. How flummoxed do we think Joe Roberts was? Because, so let me tell you a little tale. On the Saturday evening, head of Silverstone, I had the riders up on the stage with me. Somebody from the crowd shouted to Joe, "Tell us about 2025." And I was like, "Joe, come on, they want to know what you're doing next year. Like, tell us." And he's like, "Oh, guys, I can't. But like, I'm telling you, it's good. It's really good."
Yeah. As it turned
what happened?
What did happen? It's a situation. Agura, I don't know. I've got no clue. I love you've got Brivio in the background. You know, Davide Brivio is pretty smart fella to have in a team, and picking Agura, it's kind of inspired in a way. I mean, it will have yanked the rug out from underneath Joe Roberts in a massive kind of a way, particularly if he thought that deal was going to stay on the table. But clearly they were running the double bloody strategy, weren't they, at Trackhouse, until they got to where they got to, and then Joe's sent on his bike. I mean, I like Trackhouse. I think it's a great team, and I think that they've yet to perform in the manner that we know that they're going to. I mean, they've just not had luck this year. It's been an unfortunate year for them, but I do like the way that team is working, and I think it's only a matter of time. Even Fernandez he's had some good rides this year. Really, none of them have been that fruitful, but if you look across at what's going on, before you know it, they're just going to explode into a crescendo of results, I think, at Trackhouse.
I mean, I get the Agura signing from a purely sporting perspective. I mean, I think, first of all, as Keith mentioned, Davide Brivio is a very, very astute operator in the rider market, proving that down the years, was influential in getting Rossi to Yamaha in 2004. And then more recently in his career, he's been very, very good at spotting the sort of the rough diamonds, the gems in Moto2. He brought Maverick Vinales to Suzuki, Joan Mir to Suzuki. They won the World Championship. Alex Rins as well. So he has got pedigree at picking out riders that have shown enough in Moto2 that they can cut it in MotoGP. And I think Agura won in consistently on the podium in Moto3. He's now won in Moto2 for Calix and Boscoscuro and for Pirelli and Dunlop. So there's a few strings to his bow. What I don't get, and I have to say this, and this is with the greatest respect to Raul Fernandez, out of the whole Trackhouse thing, I don't get why they gave him another 2 years. That's the baffling one for me. Because they say that, we've been impressed with his work ethic, we've been impressed with his attitude. Fine, but you need to be impressed with the results on the circuit. That's what cuts it at the end of the day. And I do feel it's a missed opportunity in some respects, because it seemed like the planets are aligned. When was the last time we had an American team, a fully dedicated American team in the paddock? We've got an American rider, a Californian, a guy who plays in a band. He's got the model good looks. He's got the talk. I mean, it just seemed there was so much upside to Joe Roberts, and it just made so much perfect sense. An American team, American rider, not to be. I'm not gonna criticise Justin Marks and Davide Brivio, because they're the ones that are calling the shots. They're the ones that are paying the checks. But you just feel that it was a squandered opportunity, really.
Proof of the pudding will be next year, and we'll see what happens at the end of the day. Fernandez might give us all a bit of a shock. Sometimes when a rider's given just a little bit more of a belief from the management, sometimes they come up with the goods. He's an unusual character, Fernandez, but if he does come up with it, then we'll maybe have to eat humble pie when it comes to that. Yeah,
I've got the knife and fork ready just in case.
We shall see.
I eat with my hand.
It's been such a pleasure to have you on, and just really interesting to hear your thoughts and takes. I've missed them. You guys got a weekend off now, and then you're off to Aragon. How you feeling? This is going to be like the busy end of the season rolling on for you now.
Yes. Yeah, the old suitcase and the passport's going to get a proper hammering over the next few weeks or so. Yeah, Aragon, Misano, back-to-back, a weekend off, then back to Misano, and then, off on our travels. I think to where Keith is right now in the beautiful Thailand. So, looking forward to it.
And I'm on Koh Samui at the moment, and if I look like I'm sweating, it's because it's 35 degrees here and the aircon don't work. I've had people in the loft of this hotel trying to, if you think this is my curtains, no, it's not. It's the hotel that we're in. I was expecting a little man in blue overalls to come wandering in here, and my southern Thai is absolutely crap, so there's no way I was going to be able to communicate with him. Like, we're on a podcast in Thai. Slightly strange, but the electricity's gone off here, and I'm absolutely sweating my whatsits off. But it gives us an opportunity to say, of course, we start next year, 2025, in Thailand. We're at Buriram. It's the first round and testing as well. So there's a complete change come 2025 as to the start of things. And of course, at the time of the year, then that really, from a tourist point of view here in Thailand, it's the best time of year. Anywhere between November and March. March is just about to be on the turn, but it's the driest, nicest time of the year to be in Southeast Asia. So you might be asking, why the bloody hell are you there in August?
And also Thailand, you mentioned Thailand looks like it will kick off next season, and there could be a Thai rider in MotoGP as well. Somkiat Chantra, that rumour in Austria was gathering some serious momentum, so that could be awesome. First Grand Prix of the season in Thailand, Marc Marquez in the Ducati GP25, a Thai rider in MotoGP for for the first time. Start getting your tickets now for Burrim, I think, next year.
Well, the guy who owns Buriram is Chang, or the owner of Chang Beer. If you remember, there was a bit of a contractual problem between Dorna, who have Singer Beer, which is the other Thai entity in the beer department. I think it's three really: Leo, Chang, and Singer. And Singer Beer obviously sponsor Dorna around the tracks. You'll see it at the side of the tracks. But the guy who owns Chang Beer, owns the football stadium, which is the biggest and the best in Thailand, and Buriram as the racetrack, which are next to each other. The stadium's right next door to it. So there was a bit of an argument going on there. Maybe Mr. Chang has decided to stump up a few quid as well and do the Qatar thing where you chuck a few quid at it and get the first round. And of course, as you say, if Somkiat, who has got a fantastic following here, Somkiat Chantra, his smile absolutely is Thailand. There is no doubt in my mind. Apart from when you're at 35 degrees and your aircon's back.
Right, guys. Pleasure to speak to you both, as always. That's all from us for this week. Do remember to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to us. And if you would like to check out the links below, you can find out more information on our Patreon and YouTube memberships. But we will be back next week for more podcast action. Can't remember off the top of my head what we've got on, but it'll be something good, as always. But that from all of us here for now, it's goodbye.